So I want to talk to you about some examples on scheduling small group instruction in your math class and how to really make it work for you as a teacher and some different choices you can definitely have. So this first example is the one that makes the most sense to me, but it may be different for you. So just here's some different suggestions and ideas that I have. I will show two other examples, one very similar and one vastly different. So have a look. So the first idea is that this is a rotation schedule with three groups, thinking that you have a low group, a middle group, and a high group. Now, your low, middle, and high group is just so that you're teaching students at their level that are about around the same ability, and your groups will always be flexible. So this is just one example you can go through. So assuming that your math period has three sort of chunks, so you have 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and 20 minutes that you can spend with each group. That may be about 15 minutes with each group once you deal with some transitions and some time lost there. So every group is going to have three things to do. They're going to have teacher time, they're going to have independent work time, and they're going to have something that feels like a game or a puzzle, something that'll help their brain, but feels a little like a reward. So some ideas for independent activities. This is anything that feels like review. Remember, the number one rule for guided math is the work that they're doing independent is not new. It can't be something they just learned. It has to be something that they're practicing. So it's review, it's some independent practice, but something that is definitely not new. And something that feels like a game or puzzle. Maybe this is a computer games and you're using SumDog or Math Playground or anything else that students can do some practice, but it feels a bit like a reward. And maybe it actually is a puzzle like Tangrams or something like that. Something that feels a little bit like a reward. So now we're going to deal with the groups. Your low group are your kids that need some extra time. That need some support getting up. So they'd start with you because sometimes you're also dealing with some behaviors. So touching base with the low kids may work well to you to start the day. So you start with the low kids, and the low kids go from teacher to the independent activity, and then they have that thing that feels like a reward for their good work. Now your middle group, because you want them to also progress forward, they're actually going to start with the game or puzzle, so you don't need to worry too much about them. They're going to start with their game and puzzle, then you're going to have a little bit of teacher time with them, and then they're going to have time for their independent work. Your last group, your high group, will start with their independent work, then they'll have time for a game and puzzle, and you'll get some time with them at the end. Another way to do a rotation too is to not leave your low group, your high group to the end, but actually start with them. So I'll do the same sort of setup, but I'm actually going to change up the time slightly. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say this is your first chunk of time. It's your second chunk of time and your third chunk of time, because each one of these times won't be equal. It'll be based on the students, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So in this case, the teacher actually starts with a high group that'll then move into their independent activity and then their game. Now, with that high group, you may not need the whole 20 minutes or a third of the class. You may only need to see them for 10 minutes just to teach them something new, get them to practice something, and then you can move on. Now with your middle group, you want to see the middle group next. And they may only take about 15 minutes of your time. Your middle group did start with a game and will finish with their independent activity. And that way, your low group you'll see at the end. And if you have a class that's an hour long and you've only taken 10 and 15 minutes for their first two groups, that means you've got 35 minutes to work with your low kids. Giving them a short independent activity is not a bad thing because they need more than they need. Right now, as they're doing their independent practice, you'll be doing way more independent practice with them. It's not so much independent, but that practice time with you. And then they'll have some time for their game. And so this is an example that you can really flow with the kids and not be so restricted with your time. But this does take some rehearsing to do. Now, this last example is one example I'm really liking for middle years and senior years students, that students have things that they must do. Things that they must do in the class. And this would be like math journal. They'll have to do a math journal. They'll do a review or an independent practice. Something that they have to do a journal, they have to do one review and an independent practice, and they'll have to do a number of the day. And then after that, they need to they then have to do 10 minutes on Khan Academy. And then when done, then you'll have a list of when you're done activities that you can generate with kids. And this could be silent reading, this could be continuing on in your math journal, this could be problem solving, this could be all sorts of tasks that students can do. But what the teacher does during this time is we'll work with a group of kids. And teachers will call the groups as needed. And this really gives you some freedom, teachers, for pulling in the flexible groups. So you could choose to grab your low kids, then your middle kids, then your high kids. You could choose to work with a student you haven't seen for a while and work with him for a lot, and then see your low group. Or you can see your high group, then your middle group, then your low group. But you get to choose that up, and it doesn't need to be the exact same thing. But what the must do is, it doesn't matter for you the order that it is in, but that these things that the kids need to do every day. And they start having that routine. And the order they do it doesn't really matter to you, but it's the things that they must do. So there's a little more work for teachers in the evenings and before class starts to set this up. But the sequencing of the lesson really can be up to you, because it's just a matter of what group you're going to see that day. And that's really up to you. So those are some 3 suggestions on scheduling your small group instruction.